Organizations are facing many modern-day on-premises application management challenges, including complexity, costs, and risks of human errors. A core part of the application stack is the database, so any issues at the database layer can translate into poor user experiences and business risk. Migrating databases to the cloud can address these issues and can help organizations improve database performance. A business value study conducted by IDC on behalf of Google found evidence of all these benefits and more. In this webinar, we'll take a look at these results and delve into how Google Cloud SQL works. Welcome, I'm Ann Taylor, Content Strategist at CIO Marketing Services, and I'll be your host for this webcast, which is brought to you by Google Cloud and CIO. Let me introduce our speakers. Yoav Eilat is the Product Marketing Manager at Google Cloud. Yoav, thanks so much for being here. Please share a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name again is Yoav Eilat, and I'm a Product Marketing Manager at Google Cloud based in California and focusing on databases.
Wonderful. Carl Olofsson is Research Vice President, Data Management Software at IDC. Carl, welcome. Please tell us a little bit about your role at IDC.
Oh, thanks very much. I've been in the database, data management, and software design business for about 45 years as a developer, as a product manager, as a consultant, and most recently as an analyst studying the data management software market, mostly studying database software and including database management systems and tools and how they're implemented. So my role here is in looking at Google Cloud SQL and looking at how customers have experienced the move from their prior configurations, which are mostly on-prem, to the Google Cloud SQL environment.
Great, thank you. Well, before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items for our audience. We're coming to you on demand, so although we can't take your questions in real time, we still want to hear from you. Just use the Ask a Question widget on your player and you'll receive a response via email in a few days. Also, there is additional information on today's topic in the resources section of your player. You can also download a copy of today's presentation, among other great resources. And with that, I'd like to hand over the conversation to Yoav. Could you start by setting the stage and defining Google Cloud SQL?
Sure. So just to give everyone some background on the product that we're talking about today. So Cloud SQL, as the name implies, it's a cloud database service. It basically allows you to run some of the most popular database engines, MySQL, Postgres, and SQL Server. And it's fully managed, meaning you don't need to mess with all of the mundane database administration tasks, backups and upgrades and all of those things. It's fully done for you. The engines are simply those, the standard versions of those engines. They get updated by us all the time. So basically takes all of that off your hands and you can just focus on building your application. We've built the service to be very scalable, to scale up to enterprise level application deployments, and invested a lot in security so that it's trusted with encryption at rest, in transit, identity management, governance, everything you need in order to run applications at the enterprise level. And it's very developer friendly, so we provide observability so that you can do performance management and troubleshooting and all of those things that you need to do as an application developer using a database. So what we're going to look at today is how what the benefits are based on the study that we did with IDC. And with that, let me hand it over to you, Carl, to tell us about the study that you did.
Yes, sure. We did a study, and I'll be going over some of the details of that in a few minutes. But we did a study in which we interviewed a number of customers of Google Cloud SQL to learn about their experience in moving from their on-prem environment to Google Cloud SQL and to learn what benefits they experienced by doing that. So let's talk a little bit about the agenda for today, which begins with a question, well, why are we doing this? Why would we move to the cloud? What's wrong with staying on-prem? So we'll talk a little bit about that. Then I'll give you a more detailed overview of the project that we conducted, which is called a Business Value Project, and I'll explain why. We'll talk about the project participants and their Google Cloud SQL environments, and then we'll go over the benefits that they experienced, both quantitative and qualitative from the study. They gave us a number of interesting insights in their comments, which I think you'll find helpful. And then we'll wrap up with a summary and some conclusions. Okay, so in answering the question, why are we moving to the cloud? The answer comes from the problems inherent in running database management systems on-prem. It begins with the issue of complexity and human error. In other words, there are a lot of moving parts in databases, as probably all of you know, and there are a lot of things that you need to keep track of, and it's very easy to make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes can have dire consequences. So it requires you to be on your toes. It also causes you to be a little slow in moving, changing, migrating functionality to respond to the changing business needs because of all the things you have to do that. At the same time, there are increasing demands for high performance, and there's a wider variety of data required in databases than before, and it's coming from all kinds of sources, including streaming sources. So setting up a database that can handle all that, that can size, resize, downsize, upsize, speed up, etc., is extremely difficult. And it takes a lot of time to do these things. And in fact, it takes so much time from DBAs to do basic database operations to keep the system running that they hardly have time to do the work that's needed in order to help developers with the right kinds of data that they need for their applications to operate properly, which slows down the development process and makes it harder to develop applications that meet the needs of the business. At the same time, there are new vulnerabilities appearing in DBMSs all the time. And by that I mean security vulnerabilities, holes in the system that bad actors can take advantage of. And so it's necessary constantly to be installing security patches to protect yourself, because once a security patch is issued, everybody knows about them, so you have to secure yourself with these patches. But security patches are costly because you have to schedule time to apply them, you have to take the system down, there's usually a third shift operator activity involved, and so organizations tend to batch them up, which means they go for some period of time open and vulnerable to security breaches because of the overhead and scheduling required to apply the patches. And increasingly, there's a greater and greater need to build new applications, which in turn requires new databases, or to update existing databases. And that creates great pressure for test and development databases. But as we all know, if you want a test database to use as part of your project, you got to get in line and have a system and some storage allocated to you and have it all set up for you, and then you can run your test. All that takes time, slows down the process. It means instead of doing updates when you need to do them, you also, again, you tend to batch them up. Okay. So enterprises have to wait for critical changes to be deployed. Enterprises have to wait for any changes to be deployed, which means that the application can't be as resilient as it should be in order to enable the enterprise to be successful. So what's really needed is a more flexible means of allocating resources, and also a means of seeing to it that those resources are properly professionally managed and aren't taking up staff time. And that is done by a cloud database service. IDC believes that there will be a dramatic rise in database deployment in the public cloud. We really see the movement, all the movement going in that direction, certainly pretty much all new development going on in the public cloud. And we have a chart to illustrate this, which shows the revenue that we've projected out over the next 5 years. Now, this is only the next 5 years. And what you will notice on this chart is that the dark blue portions of each stack represent on-prem. So you can see that those numbers aren't changing very much, a little bit, not much. Okay, that represents maintenance activity on existing applications, mostly in large enterprises. The lighter blue portion of the stack represents cloud deployment. You can see that's where all the real growth is taking place in this market. This is both because enterprises are moving database workloads to the cloud, and because they are because even the larger enterprises, which are moving more slowly because their situation is more complicated, are getting ready to do the same. And this represents a mix of transactional and analytic workloads. And over time, this will also cause an acceleration in the development of analytic applications, which I think many DBAs out there would agree are a big headache because requests for analytic data that come up all the time, and they're very hard to respond to when your only option is on-prem. So let's talk about the study that we did. We call this a business value study, and why do we call it that? It's because, I mean, sometimes people refer to these things as ROI, which is return on investment studies, but we regard this as going beyond the simple numbers of, you know, oh, we saved this much money and it runs this much faster, and therefore, you know, we're getting higher productivity. We also see it as delivering better business value in terms of the ability of the enterprise to do more business because the system is more responsive to its needs. And also there's a qualitative, as I said before, there's a qualitative aspect to this where people are telling us their experiences and how their experiences have benefited the enterprise as well. So that's why it's not just about ROI, it's a total business value picture. So what we found is that we wanted to capture this business of moving from an environment where you're maintaining database management systems on-prem to a Cloud SQL environment where the systems are being managed professionally by the Google Cloud team instead of by your people, so that your people can concentrate on higher value tasks that benefit the enterprise directly. So based on these interviews, we've calculated that an average 3-year ROI of 246%, which is pretty good, based on the fact that you're freeing up DBA and infrastructure members, reducing overall costs of database operations, enabling faster deployment and extension of database resources, and actually because the enterprise is able to win more business because it's able to respond dynamically to the changing market needs that it's faced with. So the background is such. We conducted research that explored the value and benefits of the organizations derived from using Google Cloud SQL Relational Database Service. We conducted 8 interviews. So this is 8 separate organizations in different industries. So what you get from that is a spectrum of experience. And one of the things we're interested in is to what extent are the experiences similar, despite the fact that they're differently sized and they're in different industries. And what we did was we created a model so that you can see the value and cost over time and the benefit realized by each enterprise and by the enterprises collectively. So we asked them why they chose to go to Google Cloud SQL, and these are some of the answers. They wanted to, of course, to move away from the challenges of self-management, which I've already talked about. They want to stop having their people tied up with this business of managing physical resources so that they could turn their attention to making the database more responsive to their needs. They saw the Google solution as very attractive because they felt that it was something that's easy to use, that the process of getting there was fairly straightforward, and that was attractive to them. They liked the known SLAs, that they could set an SLA and stick to it, and they had metrics in the system that helped them do that. They found that they could take away the overhead of a lot of day-to-day activities so that their DBA team could concentrate on helping the enterprise developers to build better applications. And as a matter of fact, what happens when this happens is that DBAs who may be doing both operational and development support tasks start focusing exclusively on development, and they are no longer referred to as DBAs, but as database engineers and or data engineers, and because they're doing more, because they're focused now on data modeling, on data schema development and refinement, and on making the data fit the needs of the development team, which in turn means that the developers themselves are getting more responsiveness from the data team to their requirements. And also, as I mentioned before, because it's in the cloud, They can bring up development test systems at will, and therefore they don't have to wait for resources to become available. They can do their job and execute their projects right away without encumbrance. They still, many of them have presence on other cloud providers, but they regard, in all cases, they said, they regard Google as their primary cloud provider. These are the firmographics. I'm not going to go over them in too much detail, but as you can see, again, there's a range in terms of size, both in employees and IT staff, number of business applications. So because there's a range, the interesting part is the consistency of responses that we got across those ranges. So whether you're large or small, you can look to this and say, well, people in my category experience these kinds of benefits. And we can see that the Cloud SQL database sizes range also, the number of databases. A number of them use PostgreSQL, a number of them use SQL Server, and MySQL. Those are the types of databases that we're looking at in this study, and the sizes and numbers of applications. The most significant benefits that people pointed to in this regard were that they had a nice, simple, clean API that they could use to handle database internals, that the cost was clear. You know, I mean, one of the great things about working with a cloud vendor like Google Cloud Platform is that you can see immediately what everything is doing, what you have and what it costs. Even on-prem, you don't necessarily have that, do you, if you think about it, because you're sharing servers, you know, different projects, and it's not always obvious, you know, who's taking up. You have to do a lot of complicated analysis to look at the logs and figure out who's, you know, consuming more resource and that kind of thing. You don't have to worry about any of that in the cloud. It's all laid out for you. You have the ability to invest in innovation instead of in just keeping the lights on. You have lower management costs. You have the ability to leverage the engineers in the team to actually help you in various ways, make your operations more successful. And of course, again, DBA efficiencies, platform stability, all those things are taken care of for you so you can concentrate on solving business problems. So the average annual benefit per Google Cloud SQL database across the board. So you'll notice the IT infrastructure cost reductions is relatively small. If you've been following the process of migration to the cloud, you find that the costs that the fees that you pay for infrastructure are, you know, relatively, I mean, they are appropriate to the resources that you use. They're not going to be wildly different from the cost of standing up the infrastructure. This is just the infrastructure in your data center. But you get a significant savings in staff productivity because you don't have to manage that infrastructure. They are managing it for you. And that management is built into that cost figure. So it's actually more savings than it looks like when you just look at this chart. But the real benefit is the business productivity because everything is smooth as glass. You get projects done on time. You have applications that come online just at the right time for the enterprise or get modified just in time for the enterprise. You deliver that analysis to senior management right on time, no delays. It's more detailed than it was before. They get what they want. All those things translate into business productivity benefits, and those are calculable. And I can't, in this brief period of time, explain how the calculation works, but trust me, it's a very valid process. So the efficiencies that we found in using Google Cloud SQL, according to the people that we interviewed, include the shift of DBAs away from the low-level activities of managing the system to the high-value activities of managing applications and delivering valid and useful analytic data to management when they need it. And trust me on this one, if you're working to just improve or maintain responsiveness of your system by fiddling with the infrastructure and so forth, and that's how you spend most of your time, that's great, but senior management, even middle management, doesn't really see that. But when they get the data that they need on time, when they get the data they need on time, and they can make requests and have those requests satisfied in a timely manner, and they're seeing projects being delivered on time, they notice that, and then you get noticed. So that's a big benefit in item number 1 on the slide. Of course, the reduced hidden costs, as I mentioned before, there are lots of costs. When you add up everything that it takes to run a database system, it's not just the hardware, it's not just the software, or even just the routine management activities, but there are a lot of underlying detailed things that you have to do, troubleshooting that involves infrastructure, and so on. Those are gone here. Also, Google is handling upgrades, so you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to schedule it. If there's a failover, God forbid, happens, they take care of that too. You don't have to have a procedure. You don't have to wake people up in the middle of the night. They take care of it. They minimize DBA work again, so the DBAs can do the high-value stuff rather than the stuff that is also high-value but not visible. And it gives you a cloud-based approach, which changes knowledge requirements, and so that they can really apply their people to the problem of development. They don't have to have all this arcane, detailed knowledge of how physical systems work and so forth in order to get their jobs done. And so we found that DBA team efficiencies were greatly improved, as you can see from the numbers on this slide. Overall, 44% benefit, pretty good. And the databases per DBA increased from 31 to 55. That means that you have more databases per staff member. This doesn't necessarily mean, some of you might be thinking, oh, that means they're going to lay us off. Actually, when people find that they are able to be more productive and successful, they tend to implement more databases. So don't worry about that. What's really going to happen here is that there's going to be more bang for the buck for the enterprise overall. And the 3-year cost of operations per database tumble from 16,300 on average to 11,800. That's a 28% reduction in total cost. Okay, so the customers told us that benefits that they derived included less friction associated with database complexity, because there isn't that much complexity that they have to deal with directly. The automated database deployment enables faster time to market, as I mentioned. The scalability and speed are key to business survival. This is an item that people are becoming increasingly aware of. And the fact is that if you can be more agile, you can be more successful. Flexibility enables greater speed and effectiveness, and you get more timely and predictable development capabilities. Again, all this adds up to the same thing. You can get your job done on time or even ahead of time, and delight the enterprise, delight your managers, and delight the people who use the applications that your databases support. So the revenue gains for the enterprise overall, because of all these benefits, showed increases, as you see here on the chart. I'm not going to read them out. You can read them for yourself. And again, you'll get copies of these slides, but they're significant. And these are the calculations. These are the calculations that we used and the answers that we came up with regarding benefits for the use of Cloud SQL. Direct database costs, DBA team efficiencies, development team productivity gains, higher net revenue, which is, of course, the bottom line, isn't it? And so each organization experienced benefits. They're roughly in proportion to the size of the enterprise. These are the average overall. And this is the ROI analysis. I think the important column here is the per Google Cloud SQL database, because that was really something that was uniform, and users can expect something like that. We don't guarantee it. There's only 8 people in the study, so we can't say that this is, rock solid across hundreds or thousands of cases, but they're good enough that we can say that this gives you an idea of the kind of benefit you can realize from the system. So in conclusion, maintaining a database is cumbersome and leaving the operation of database to cloud staff increases the agility and empowers your staff. We believe that over 3 years, that organizations, based on this study, will really realize significant average return on investment. In this study, it was 246%, which is pretty good. It's not just about the numbers, though. It's also about the fact that it's just easier, better, people are more comfortable, feel safer doing what they're doing, and their value is increased. So our recommendations include identifying databases that are good candidates to move to the cloud right away. Some of them may take longer because of internal dependencies and so forth. To determine which applications will be impacted. develop a schedule. This also helps you to make your case, because you can say these applications will be more smooth. They will develop more quickly and readily, which will have an impact because of what they do for the enterprise. You have to expect that you're going to need to rewrite your applications over time as you move into the cloud in order to get full efficiency on the application side. That has to be part of the plan. You study all the fee structures, look at the experiences of others who've already done this, and finally, we would recommend that you strongly consider Google's Cloud SQL service as a target for this move. And so that, in a nutshell, is the material that I had to present to you today, and I hope you found it useful. Handing off to Yoav now.
Thank you, Carl. So I'm really happy to see that Cloud SQL got these really good results and such a good payback for moving to this product. And I wanted to summarize with a few words about the top features and benefits. And obviously, there's many database options in the cloud. The capabilities of those products vary between those all those offerings that are on the market. So some of the main things that are good about Cloud SQL, like we said, it's open and standards-based, so you can run the database engines that you already know, which means that migrations will be pretty simple. It's scalable with many different compute instance types, and you can add read replicas and other ways to scale your deployment and your storage as you need it. High availability and security, which we've covered a little bit. You can do a multi-region deployment for more resilience against failures in a region or in an instance. The developer experience, which I'll mention in a moment, I'll say a few more words, is very easy for doing database troubleshooting and performance optimization. It's integrated with the rest of Google's cloud services. So if you're deploying your application on GCE, on GKE, meaning on Kubernetes, if you're integrating with analytics and machine learning capabilities that you find in the cloud, we make it as easy as possible to do that. If your database is Cloud SQL, there's a lot of pre-built integrations that you can take advantage of. And the database migration service is available to migrate your databases from on-prem or from other clouds, or even if you deployed your database on your own, even on Google Cloud, and you want to move to Cloud SQL as a managed service, database migration service makes it easy to do that. And I want to say before we end the presentation, I wanted to just make a quick comment about the new capabilities of what we call Cloud SQL Insights, which is our observability feature for Cloud SQL. It's supported Postgres databases for a while, and now we have announced the general availability of MySQL. This was about a month ago. So basically, it allows you to very easily optimize the performance of your SQL queries, see the top SQL, see what is causing slowdowns in your database, and make improvements to your application or to your operations in order to get better performance. So how do you get started? You can start your Cloud SQL journey by visiting our website, cloud.google.com/SQL, and you're welcome to try the product for free with a $300 credit, and the link is on this slide. And with that, I'll hand it back to Anne to wrap up.
Great. And before we wrap up, I'd like to just ask a few questions and also remind our listeners that they can pose their own questions within the player, and we'll get back to you within a few days via email. But let's just take a few questions, and my first one is for Carl. Among your recommendations is to study costs and fee structures of cloud services. Are there any particular areas for focus here, or maybe some hidden cost surprises that our listeners should seek to avoid?
Yes, well, the policies of cloud providers vary in terms of the fees for the resources that you use. So whichever cloud you look at, you have to figure out what is the optimal choice, which usually involves some sort of, you contract for an average resource consumption, and then you contract for jumps, which cause, of course, because they're at a higher rate, that cause your bill to go up. So you need to be aware of that. The structures are different for each one, and choose the cloud service that is going to be, I would say, more importantly than anything, not only that it seems cheaper or about the same, but where there are no surprises, because that's the thing we hear most about are people who encounter unfortunate surprises in their cloud bills.
Interesting. Carl, one more question for you. With managed cloud services such as Cloud SQL automating many of the mundane database administration tasks, where would you advise DBAs to take their careers next?
Well, I think that some DBAs pride themselves on their ability to allocate data to physical files and to, balance the files across storage systems and all that kind of thing, and run their database in the server with maximum efficiency. Those are great skills, okay? But those skills are not going to help in the cloud because that's being done for you. So what you really need to do is focus on the things that help developers and help your management be more effective. So the skills involved have to do with things like data modeling, database schema design. Schema design, you have a great opportunity here because the environment will allow you to have a fully normalized database. You don't have to make a lot of the compromises that you had to make on-prem in order to minimize resources and save money. So you can focus on delivering a schema that really helps the application developer build a better application. It helps analysts get the data they need to present their reports and their analyses to top management. And that allows managers to see the values that they need. That should be the focus. It's an upper level function, in which case you become, as I said during the presentation, no longer are you just a DBA. I don't want to say just DBA because I have a lot of respect for DBAs, but you're now going to be considered a data engineer. You're part of the engineering team focusing on data and helping the enterprise to be more successful with data, which is really why you got into this business in the first place, isn't it?
That's great. Yoav, a question for you. Are there any other areas of cloud migration for relational databases that IT leaders and managers should pay particular attention to?
Yes, absolutely. We see the move to the cloud as a journey, and we like to take a very structured approach to that. And Carl mentioned earlier that at some point you may want to update your application or change it as part of the move to the cloud, but it doesn't need to be done right away. And that's very true in terms of what we see with Google customers. So usually they take it in several phases. They start with a simple lift and shift migration to something like Cloud SQL, which obviously runs the same database engines that people already know, so it's pretty simple. And then they do more of a modernization project later, and maybe even a complete transformation at the end of the road, where if they have the resources and the time to completely rewrite the application to take advantage of everything that the cloud has. So what I think I would recommend to that companies do is do an assessment and a discovery of which databases and which applications they're using on-prem, which ones should go to the cloud first, which ones are the easiest, and then over time move the ones that are that need a bigger transformation, maybe as part of some other corporate IT project, and those would maybe be at the end of the road.
Yeah, I might also add, you need to take into account operational dependencies. In other words, if one application depends on data from another application, you probably need to move them together.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, we need to close out this webcast. This has been such a great discussion, so many valuable insights and great information here. Let me thank our speakers. Yoav, thanks for your time today and sharing all this great information.
Sure. And thank you too.
And Carl, thank you so much for walking us through the results of the value study. It is definitely a valuable resource for our listeners.
Well, it was a pleasure, and as you could tell from the speed with which I was talking, there's so much that could be said about this, and so little time. I tried to make the most of it. I hope the listeners got value from it.
Definitely. And thanks to our listeners for tuning in. Please be sure to check out that resources section where you can get the presentation and other great resources. Thanks to our sponsor, Google, for making this happen. And on behalf of Google Cloud and CIO, I'm Ann Taylor.